Welcome to Moon Mind Temple, where ancient wisdom meets your need for peace right now. Whether you're here because stress has been weighing on your heart, sleep feels impossible to find, or you're simply curious about the gentle path of Buddhism, you've arrived at exactly the right moment. For the next 3 hours, we'll journey together through timeless stories and simple truths that have brought comfort to millions of people across thousands of years. You don't need to believe anything, study anything, or even stay awake for everything. This is simply an invitation to rest, while wisdom quietly plants seeds of peace in your mind. If it feels right, take a moment to get truly comfortable. Perhaps grab a soft blanket, dim your lights, and if you'd like to connect with our global community of peaceful hearts, share where in this beautiful world you're listening from. Tonight you're not alone. Let's begin with something that might surprise you. Buddhism isn't really a religion in the way most people think of religion. There's no God to worship, no commandments handed down from above, no heaven or hell waiting for you. Instead, Buddhism is more like a gentle science of the mind, a collection of observations about how our thoughts create our suffering, and simple practices that can bring us peace. Imagine Buddhism as a medicine cabinet filled with remedies for the aches and pains of daily life, not physical medicines, but tools for healing, worry, anxiety, anger, and that restless feeling that keeps so many of us awake at night. The beautiful thing is, you don't need to believe in anything supernatural to benefit from these tools. They work simply because they're based on truths about how our minds actually function. The story of how these insights came to be begins 2,500 years ago with a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama. Picture the most protected, privileged life you can imagine. Siddhartha lived in not one, but 3 magnificent palaces, each designed for a different season. His father, King Suddhodana, loved his son so deeply that he tried to shield him from every possible source of pain or discomfort. The prince wore only the finest silks, ate the most delicious foods, and was surrounded by musicians, dancers, and poets whose only job was to keep him entertained and happy. A white parasol was held over his head wherever he walked, protecting his skin from harsh sunlight or rain. Servants anticipated his every need before he even knew he had it. At 16, he married the beautiful Princess Yasodhara, and they had a son together. By every measure our world uses to define success, Siddhartha had it all. Yet something stirred within him, a quiet restlessness that all the luxury in the world couldn't touch. Have you ever felt this way? Perhaps you've had moments when you achieved something you thought would make you happy, got the job, bought the house, found the relationship, only to discover that the satisfaction faded quickly, leaving you wondering if there might be something more to life. In our modern world, we create our own versions of Siddhartha's palace. We surround ourselves with entertainment, social media, shopping, busy schedules, anything to avoid sitting quietly with the uncomfortable questions that life naturally brings. We tell ourselves that if we just work harder, earn more, find the perfect partner, get the right house in the right neighborhood, then we'll finally feel content. But like Siddhartha, many of us discover that external achievements, no matter how impressive, can't touch that deeper restlessness in our hearts. This is exactly what Siddhartha experienced, but magnified. He had everything, yet felt an inexplicable urge to understand the deeper truths of existence. Against his father's wishes, he decided to venture beyond the palace walls to see the real world. What happened next would change not only his life, but eventually touch millions of lives across centuries. On his first journey outside the palace, Siddhartha encountered an elderly man, bent with age, struggling to walk. This was the prince's first glimpse of old age. His chariot driver gently explained that this was the natural fate of all human beings, that everyone who lives long enough will experience the weakening of their body, the fading of their strength. On his second journey, he saw a person suffering from illness, writhing in pain. Again, his driver explained that sickness comes to all people, regardless of their wealth or status. On his third journey, he witnessed something that shook him to his core, a funeral procession. He learned that death was not something that happened to other people, in other places, but the inevitable end that awaits every living being, including himself, his beloved wife, his precious son. These sights didn't make Siddhartha depressed, though they certainly disturbed his peace. Instead, they awakened in him a profound compassion and an urgent question that burns in many hearts today. If everyone must face aging, sickness, and death, if everyone experiences disappointment, loss, and heartbreak, how can anyone find genuine peace and lasting happiness? Think about your own life for a moment. How much energy do you spend trying to avoid or deny these basic realities? How often do you lie awake at night worrying about your health, your loved ones, your future? How much of your stress comes from fighting against things you ultimately cannot control? On his fourth and final journey outside the palace, Siddhartha encountered something that offered hope. A wandering monk, someone who had given up material possessions in search of spiritual understanding. This monk's face radiated a peace that the prince had never seen, even among the wealthiest and most pampered people in his palace. The monk had very little in terms of worldly goods, yet seemed to possess something far more valuable, an inner contentment that didn't depend on external circumstances. That night, Siddhartha made a decision that would echo through history. He looked at his sleeping wife and child, knowing they would lack for nothing in his absence. He looked around at all the luxury that surrounded him, understanding that none of it could answer the questions burning in his heart. Then, in the quiet hours before dawn, he left everything behind. This wasn't a decision made from anger, disappointment, or failure. Siddhartha left his comfortable life precisely because it was so comfortable, so easy, so removed from the realities that most people face. He realized that any wisdom he might gain while protected from life's challenges would be incomplete. If he wanted to find answers that could help all people find peace, he needed to understand suffering from the inside. For 6 years, Siddhartha wandered throughout India, learning from the greatest spiritual teachers of his time. He mastered meditation techniques that could calm the mind for hours. He practiced such severe self-discipline that his body became skeletal, his eyes sunken, his skin pale as death. He pushed his body and mind to their limits, thinking that enlightenment might come through extreme effort and self-denial. But after 6 years of this intense seeking, Siddhartha realized he was no closer to the peace he sought. In fact, The extreme practices had weakened his body so severely that his mind couldn't function clearly. He understood something crucial, that just as a life of luxury hadn't brought him lasting happiness, a life of extreme hardship wouldn't either. The path to peace lay somewhere in the middle, in what he would later call the middle way. This middle way isn't about being lukewarm or uncommitted. It's about finding balance, understanding that extremes in any direction, whether toward indulgence or deprivation, tend to create more suffering rather than less. In our modern lives, this wisdom applies beautifully. We don't need to become monks or give up all our possessions to find peace, but we also can't find it by endlessly accumulating things or experiences. Siddhartha made another important decision. He would stop following other people's methods and trust his own inner wisdom. He remembered a moment from his childhood when he had sat quietly under a rose apple tree during a festival, simply watching and breathing, and had experienced a natural, effortless peace. Perhaps the answers he sought weren't to be found in extreme practices or complex teachings, but in the simple act of sitting quietly and observing his own mind. He found a place beside a river, under a large fig tree that would later be called the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening. A kind woman offered him a bowl of rice milk, and for the first time in years, he accepted nourishment without guilt. His strength began to return. Then he sat down under the tree and made a vow that would transform human understanding. He would not rise from that spot until he found the answers he sought. What happened during the night under that tree has been described in many ways, some mystical, some psychological. The essence of it was this: by sitting very still and observing his own mind with complete honesty, Siddhartha began to see how his thoughts created his experiences. He watched as desires arose in his mind, wanting things to be different, fearing future pain, regretting past decisions. He observed how these mental movements created suffering, and how letting them pass without resistance brought peace. Through the night, he gained insight after insight into the nature of human suffering and the path to freedom from it. He saw that much of our pain doesn't come from external circumstances, but from our mental reactions to those circumstances. He understood that peace wasn't something to be achieved through getting what we want, but through changing our relationship with wanting itself. This insight is profound yet practical. Consider your own experience. How often is your suffering caused, not by what's actually happening, but by your thoughts about what's happening? The deadline at work isn't inherently stressful. It's your thoughts about failing, about not being good enough, about what others might think that create the stress. The approaching storm isn't fearful. It's your imagination of what might go wrong that generates anxiety. When dawn broke, Siddhartha had become the Buddha, which simply means the awakened one. He had awakened from the dream that happiness comes from external things and discovered the source of peace that exists within every human being. Now, you might wonder, what does this ancient story have to do with your modern life, your stress, your sleepless nights? The connection is more direct than you might think. The same mental patterns that created suffering 2,500 years ago are still creating suffering today. We still chase after things we think will make us happy, then feel disappointed when they don't provide lasting satisfaction. We still worry about future problems that may never happen and replay past mistakes that can't be changed. The beautiful truth that Buddha discovered is that this cycle of mental suffering is not our natural state. Just as a muddy glass of water will become clear when you stop stirring it, your mind can find its natural peace when you learn to stop stirring it with constant worry, wanting, and resistance to what is. Tonight, as you listen to these words, you're already practicing what Buddha discovered under that tree. You're sitting quietly, allowing your mind to rest from its usual busyness, giving yourself permission to simply be present without needing to accomplish anything or fix anything. This is the beginning of the path that Buddha walked, not a path away from life, but deeper into the peace that life naturally contains when we stop fighting it. The insights that came to Buddha under the Bodhi tree weren't complex philosophical theories. They were simple, practical observations about how the mind works and how peace can be found. These observations became the foundation of everything we'll explore together tonight. And the most beautiful part is that you don't need to sit under a tree for 6 years to benefit from them. Buddha did the hard work of discovery so that those who came after could find peace more gently, more gradually, in the midst of their ordinary lives. After Buddha's awakening under the Bodhi tree, his insights began to spread throughout India and eventually across Asia, touching countless lives along the way. As these teachings traveled from teacher to student, from one culture to another, they naturally evolved and adapted while maintaining their essential wisdom. In China, Buddhism met with the practical philosophy of Taoism and gave birth to what we now call Zen Buddhism, a beautifully simple approach that cuts straight to the heart of awakening through direct experience rather than complex study. Zen masters understood something profound. The deepest truths often reveal themselves not through lengthy explanations, but through simple stories that speak directly to our hearts. These stories, called koans, were carefully crafted to bypass our analytical minds and awaken a deeper understanding. Tonight, let's explore a few of these timeless tales, allowing them to plant seeds of wisdom in the quiet garden of your mind. There once lived a Zen master named Joshu, who was famous for his unusual way of teaching. One day, a sincere student approached him and asked, "Master, does a dog have Buddha nature? Does even a simple animal possess the potential for awakening?" Joshu looked at the student with kind eyes and simply said, "Mu," which means no or nothing. This might seem like a strange answer, even disappointing. After all, Buddhist teaching generally holds that all beings possess the potential for awakening. But Joshu wasn't really talking about dogs at all. He was pointing to something much more immediate and practical. When we ask questions like, "Does this have Buddha nature?" or "Am I spiritual enough?" or "Will I ever find peace?" we're often looking outside ourselves for answers that can only be found within. We're treating awakening like an object we can possess or lose, rather than recognizing it as our natural state that simply needs to be uncovered. Joshu's mu was like a gentle hand sweeping away all these mental constructions, pointing directly to the present moment where peace already exists. Think about your own experience right now. As you listen to these words, is there anything you need to add to this moment to make it more complete? Is there any special knowledge or achievement required for you to simply be here, breathing, aware, present. This is what Joshi was pointing to, the simple reality of being alive, aware, and whole, exactly as you are. In our everyday lives, we often fall into the same trap as that earnest student. We search for happiness in achievements, relationships, possessions, or experiences, not realizing that the peace we seek is already present in the simple fact of our awareness. We ask ourselves, when will I finally be happy? When will my anxiety disappear? When will I feel complete? But these questions themselves keep us trapped in a future that never arrives. Joshu's mu cuts through all of this, pointing to the completeness that exists right here, right now. This story introduces us naturally to what Buddha called the Four Noble Truths, not as religious doctrines to believe, but as simple observations about how our minds work. These truths are like a doctor's diagnosis and prescription for the suffering that keeps us awake at night, restless during the day, and searching endlessly for something we feel is missing. The first noble truth is beautifully simple. Life contains suffering. This isn't pessimistic, it's just honest. Sometimes we get sick. Sometimes people we love leave or die. Sometimes we don't get what we want, and sometimes we get what we don't want. Even when life is going well, there's often an underlying anxiety about when it might change. Buddha wasn't saying life is only suffering, but rather that suffering is woven into the fabric of human existence, and peace comes from acknowledging this truth rather than fighting it. Consider how much energy you spend trying to avoid or deny these basic realities of life. How often do you lie awake at night worrying about your health, your finances, your relationships, your future? How much of your day is consumed by the mental effort of trying to control things that are ultimately beyond your control? The first noble truth isn't meant to depress you, but to free you from the exhausting task of fighting against reality. When you stop trying to create a life without any difficulties, something beautiful happens. You stop wasting energy on the impossible task of controlling everything, and you can use that energy instead to respond wisely to whatever life brings. This is like learning to dance with the weather instead of constantly complaining that it's not always sunny. You still prefer sunny days, but you don't suffer on rainy ones. The second noble truth reveals where most of our suffering actually comes from, and this might surprise you. It's not usually the external circumstances themselves that cause our deepest pain, but our mental reactions to those circumstances. Buddha observed that suffering arises from what he called tanha, often translated as craving or attachment, but perhaps better understood as that restless mental energy that's always wanting things to be different than they are. This shows up in countless ways throughout our days. We want the traffic to move faster, the weather to be different, our bodies to feel better, other people to behave the way we think they should. We replay conversations, wishing we'd said something different, or imagine future scenarios trying to prepare for every possibility. This constant mental activity, wanting, rejecting, planning, regretting, is like having a radio playing anxious thoughts in the background of our minds all day long. Let me share another story that illuminates this truth beautifully. Two monks were traveling together when they came to a river where a young woman stood, unable to cross the swift current alone. The older monk, without hesitation, picked her up and carried her safely to the other side. The younger monk was shocked as their monastery rules strictly forbade physical contact with women. But he said nothing out of respect for his teacher. They continued walking in silence for several hours. Finally, the younger monk could contain himself no longer. "Master," he said, "our vows forbid us to touch women, yet you carried that woman across the river. How can you justify breaking our sacred rules?" The older monk smiled gently and replied, "My friend, I set that woman down at the riverbank hours ago. You have been carrying her all this time." This story perfectly illustrates the second noble truth. The older monk responded to the situation with compassion and then let it go completely. The younger monk, however, carried the experience in his mind for hours, creating suffering through his mental resistance to what had already happened and could not be changed. How many moments of peace do we miss because we're mentally carrying experiences from the past or worrying about situations that haven't even occurred? We do this constantly in our daily lives. Someone says something that bothers us in the morning, and we replay it in our minds throughout the day, each repetition adding more emotional charge to the memory. We have a difficult conversation at work, and instead of letting it end when the conversation ends, we continue it in our heads for hours or even days. We carry these mental burdens like heavy stones in our backpacks, wondering why we feel so tired and stressed. This is where mindfulness begins to offer us freedom. Mindfulness is simply the practice of noticing what's actually happening in this moment, rather than being lost in our mental commentary about what's happening. It's like waking up from a dream where you thought you were being chased by a tiger, only to realize you're safe in your own bed. The relief comes not from fighting the tiger, but from recognizing it was never really there. The third noble truth offers us hope. It's possible to end this unnecessary suffering. Not by changing all our external circumstances, which is often impossible, but by changing our relationship to our circumstances. Buddha called this state of freedom nirvana, which literally means extinguishing or blowing out. What gets extinguished is not our life or our personality, but the mental fire of constant wanting, rejecting, and resistance that burns through our days. You might think this sounds too good to be true, or worry that letting go of wanting would make you passive or unmotivated. But the opposite is actually what happens. When you're not wasting energy on mental resistance and endless wanting, you have much more energy available for responding wisely and compassionately to life. You can still have preferences and work toward goals, but you hold them lightly, without the desperate attachment that creates suffering. Think of a skilled athlete in the flow of their sport. They want to perform well, but they're not tense or desperate about it. They're fully engaged, yet relaxed, focused, yet flexible. This is what life becomes like when we learn to hold our desires and goals with this kind of gentle attention rather than anxious grasping. The fourth noble truth is the most practical. There's a path that leads to this freedom, and anyone can walk it. Buddha called it the Noble Eightfold Path, but don't let the formal name intimidate you. It's simply a description of how to live in a way that naturally reduces suffering and increases peace. Tonight, we'll focus on the aspects that can bring immediate relief to your mind and heart. Let me share one more story that shows how simple and immediate this path can be. A famous Zen master named Bankei was giving a talk when a priest from another school started disrupting the gathering shouting arguments and trying to prove his own superiority. The other students became angry and wanted to throw the disruptor out, but Bankei raised his hand for silence. "Thank you for coming," Bankei said to the disruptive priest. "You are helping everyone here understand something important. You see, when you speak with anger, everyone can hear the anger in your voice. When I speak with peace, everyone can hear the peace. We don't need complicated philosophies or special techniques. The quality of our mind shows itself naturally in everything we do." The priest fell silent, and something in his expression softened. He had come to argue about complex philosophical points, but Bankei had pointed to something so simple and immediate that argument became impossible. The quality of our inner state naturally expresses itself through our words, actions, and presence. This is why working with our minds is not selfish. It's one of the greatest gifts we can offer to everyone around us. This story shows us something profound about how transformation actually works. We often think we need to change our external circumstances or other people's behavior to find peace. But Bankei demonstrated that when we embody peace ourselves, it naturally influences everything around us. The angry priest was disarmed not by argument or force, but by encountering genuine peace. This is the power of inner transformation. It ripples outward in ways we can't always see or measure. This brings us to the heart of mindfulness practice. You don't need to sit in a special posture or go to a monastery to begin cultivating awareness. Mindfulness is available in every moment, as close as your next breath. It's the simple practice of noticing when your mind has wandered into worry about tomorrow, noticing when you're resisting something that's happening right now, noticing the difference between experiencing life directly and experiencing your thoughts about life. Right now, for instance, you might notice the sound of these words, the feeling of whatever you're sitting or lying on, the temperature of the air around you. You might notice that your mind has been thinking about something else entirely, perhaps making plans or reviewing the day. There's no need to judge any of this. Simply noticing is enough. This gentle noticing is like turning on a soft light in a dark room. Suddenly, you can see what's actually there, rather than stumbling around in confusion. One of the most accessible ways to practice mindfulness is through attention to breathing. Your breath is always available as an anchor to the present moment. You don't need to change your breathing or make it special in any way. Simply notice that you're breathing. When your mind wanders, and it will, constantly, gently return your attention to the breath. This isn't a test you can fail. Every time you notice your mind has wandered and gently return to the breath, you're strengthening your capacity for awareness. Think of mindfulness training like exercising a muscle. At first, your attention might feel weak and easily distracted. But just as your body grows stronger with gentle, consistent exercise, your mind grows calmer and more stable with gentle, consistent practice. The beauty is that you can practice anywhere, while washing dishes, walking to your car, waiting in line at the store. Every moment offers an opportunity to come home to the present. Let me share a final story that illustrates the immediate accessibility of this practice. A busy businessman once visited a Zen temple, complaining to the master that he had no time for meditation. "I work 12 hours a day," he said. "I have meetings, deadlines, responsibilities. How can someone like me possibly find enlightenment? The master smiled and asked, "Do you breathe during your meetings?" "Of course," the man replied, confused. "Then you already know how to meditate," the master said. "Simply remember that you're breathing." This simple instruction contains the entire path. Meditation isn't about sitting in perfect silence for hours, though that can be wonderful too. It's about remembering to be present with whatever you're doing. When you're in a meeting, you can occasionally notice your breath. When you're stuck in traffic, you can feel your hands on the steering wheel. When you're washing dishes, you can feel the warm water and smooth plates. This is mindfulness in action. As you develop this capacity for mindful awareness, you begin to see more clearly how your thoughts and emotions arise and pass away. You notice that even strong emotions, when observed with gentle attention rather than resistance, tend to move through you, like weather moving through the sky. They come, they peak, and they naturally dissolve when you don't feed them with additional mental stories. This doesn't mean you become emotionally numb or disconnected. Rather, you develop what Zen calls non-attachment. You can feel your emotions fully without being overwhelmed by them. You can experience sadness without being consumed by it, anger without being controlled by it, fear without being paralyzed by it. This is true emotional intelligence, not the absence of feeling, but the wisdom to feel without losing your balance. The stories we've explored tonight all point to the same essential truth. Peace is not something you need to create or achieve. It's not hidden in some distant future when your life finally becomes perfect. Peace is your natural state, temporarily obscured by the habitual patterns of mental resistance and endless wanting. Every moment you spend in gentle awareness, simply noticing what is without immediately trying to change it, you're uncovering this natural peace. Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." This isn't metaphysical philosophy, it's practical psychology. All the external things you think you need to be happy, more money, better relationships, perfect health, ideal circumstances, might bring temporary pleasure, but they can't provide the deep contentment that comes from making peace with reality as it is. This doesn't mean you become passive or stop working to improve your life. Rather, you learn to hold your efforts lightly, working toward your goals without the desperate attachment that creates suffering when things don't go according to plan. You discover that you can be much more effective in life when you're not wasting energy fighting against what you cannot control. The Four Noble Truths and the practice of mindfulness work together like a key and a lock. The truths help you understand why you suffer and show you that freedom is possible. Mindfulness gives you the practical tool to actually experience that freedom moment by moment. Together, they offer a complete path from suffering to peace that anyone can walk, regardless of their background, beliefs, or circumstances. As we continue our journey together tonight, we'll explore how these simple principles can transform not just your meditation practice, but your entire relationship with life. We'll discover how ancient Zen wisdom can help you find peace in the midst of modern chaos, how to carry these insights into your daily activities, and how to let them naturally dissolve the barriers between formal practice and ordinary living. For now, simply rest in the understanding that you already have everything you need to begin this journey. Your breath, your awareness, your willingness to be present, these are the only tools required. The path is not about becoming someone different, but about discovering who you really are beneath all the mental noise and resistance. And that discovery can begin right here, right now, with nothing more than a gentle attention to this moment. Now that we've explored the foundation of Buddhist understanding through stories and the Four Noble Truths, let's turn our attention to the most practical aspect of this ancient wisdom: meditation. If the word meditation brings up images of people sitting in impossible positions for hours, or concerns about whether you're doing it right, let me put your mind at ease. Meditation is as natural as breathing, and tonight we'll discover together how simple and accessible it truly is. Before we dive into practice, let's clear up some common misunderstandings that keep many people from experiencing the profound benefits of meditation. Meditation isn't about stopping your thoughts. That's impossible and not even the goal. It's not about achieving some special state of consciousness or having mystical experiences. Meditation is simply the practice of training your attention, learning to be present with whatever is happening in your mind and body without immediately trying to change it. Think of meditation like learning to be a kind, patient observer of your own inner world. Imagine you're sitting by a window, watching the weather outside. Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes cloudy, sometimes stormy. You don't try to control the weather, you simply observe it with a gentle, accepting awareness. This is exactly how we approach our thoughts and feelings in meditation. The benefits of this simple practice are remarkable and well documented by modern science. Regular meditation reduces stress hormones like cortisol in your body, lowers blood pressure, improves sleep quality, and strengthens your immune system. Brain imaging studies show that meditation actually changes the physical structure of your brain, increasing gray matter in areas associated with learning, memory, and emotional regulation, while decreasing activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. But beyond these physical benefits, meditation offers something even more valuable: freedom from the constant chatter and worry that so often dominates our minds. Let me introduce you to what Buddhist teachers lovingly call monkey mind. Picture a monkey swinging frantically from branch to branch, never staying in one place for more than a moment. This is often how our minds behave, jumping from thought to thought, worry to worry, plan to plan, never finding rest. One moment you're thinking about what to make for dinner, the next you're worrying about a work deadline, then suddenly you're remembering an embarrassing moment from years ago, then planning your weekend, then wondering why you can't focus. This monkey mind isn't a flaw or something wrong with you. It's simply how untrained minds naturally behave. For thousands of years, humans needed minds that could quickly scan for dangers, remember where food was stored, and plan for future challenges. This mental activity kept our ancestors alive, but in our modern world, this same tendency often keeps us anxious, restless, and unable to fully enjoy the present moment. In our contemporary lives, monkey mind shows up in countless ways. You might be having a pleasant conversation with a friend, but part of your mind is thinking about emails you need to answer. You could be enjoying a beautiful sunset, but your thoughts drift to tomorrow's schedule. You might be trying to fall asleep, but your mind insists on reviewing every detail of the day or rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet. This constant mental activity robs us of the peace and joy that are available in each moment. Here's a story that beautifully illustrates both the problem of monkey mind and its gentle solution. Long ago, in a peaceful monastery nestled in the mountains, there lived a young monk named Kensho, who was struggling terribly with meditation. Every time he sat down to practice, his mind would explode with thoughts. He would think about the weather, worry about his family back in the village, plan what he would study later, remember conversations from days past, judge his meditation performance, and wonder if he was spiritual enough. The harder Kensho tried to stop thinking, the more frantic his thoughts became. He would sit down with determination, telling himself, "This time I will have a peaceful meditation," only to find his mind more chaotic than ever. He began to feel like a failure, watching other monks who seemed to sit in perfect stillness, while his inner world felt like a marketplace during a festival. Frustrated and discouraged, Kensho approached his teacher, an elderly master named Bankei. "Master," he said, "my mind is like a wild horse that refuses to be tamed. The other monks seem so peaceful in meditation, but I cannot stop my thoughts for even a moment. What am I doing wrong? Perhaps I'm not cut out for this spiritual life." Bankei smiled compassionately and invited Kensho to sit beside him on a bench overlooking the monastery garden. "Tell me," Bankei said gently, "what do you see in the garden?" Kensho looked and replied, "I see flowers, trees, a small pond, some stones, a few birds flying about, clouds moving across the sky." "Excellent," Bankei nodded. "Now tell me, when you were observing the garden, were you thinking about stopping the birds from flying?" "No, master," Kensho answered, puzzled. "Were you trying to make the flowers stop blooming or the leaves stop rustling in the wind?" "Of course not," Kensho replied. "I was simply watching everything as it naturally occurred." Bankei's eyes twinkled with kindness. "Then you already know how to meditate perfectly. Your thoughts are like the birds in the garden. They come and go naturally. Your job is not to stop them, but simply to observe them with the same gentle attention you gave to the garden. When you try to fight your thoughts, you become like someone running around the garden with a net trying to catch every bird. This only creates chaos and exhaustion." The young monk's face lit up with understanding. "But master, how do I simply observe when my thoughts feel so urgent and compelling? Some thoughts feel like emergencies that demand immediate attention." Bankei pointed to the small pond in the garden. "See how the water naturally becomes still when nothing disturbs it. Your mind has this same natural capacity for stillness. We give it a gentle anchor, the breath, and we return to this anchor whenever we notice the mind has wandered. This returning is not failure, it is the practice itself." Bankei continued, "Think of your thoughts as visitors to your house. Some visitors are pleasant, memories of loved ones, creative ideas, moments of gratitude. Some visitors are unwelcome, worries, regrets, harsh self-judgments. In meditation, we learn to greet all visitors politely but not invite any of them to stay for dinner. We acknowledge each thought, "Hello, worry about money," or "Hello, memory of yesterday's conversation," and then we gently escort them to the door, and return our attention to the breath. From that day forward, Kensho's meditation transformed. Instead of fighting his thoughts, he learnt to greet them like old friends passing by. "Oh, there's worry about my family," he might notice, "and there's planning for tomorrow, and there's a memory from childhood, and there's judgment about my meditation." He would acknowledge each thought kindly, and then gently return his attention to his breath. Gradually, the frantic activity of his mind began to settle, like muddy water becoming clear when you stop stirring it. This story contains the essence of all meditation instruction. The goal is not to eliminate thoughts, but to change your relationship with them. Instead of being caught up in every mental drama, you learn to step back and observe the drama with compassionate awareness. This creates a profound shift in your daily life. You become less reactive, more peaceful, and better able to respond wisely to whatever challenges arise. Now, let's explore the most fundamental meditation practice, mindfulness of breathing. Your breath is always available as an anchor to the present moment. Unlike other meditation objects that require special conditions, your breath is with you every moment of every day. It's intimate, immediate, and naturally calming. The breath also serves as a bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind, between your voluntary and involuntary functions. To begin, find a comfortable position where you can remain alert but relaxed. You can sit in a chair with your feet flat on the floor and your back supported, sit cross-legged on a cushion, or even lie down if sitting is uncomfortable. The position matters less than your intention to be present and alert. If you're sitting, imagine a string gently pulling the crown of your head toward the ceiling, allowing your spine to naturally lengthen. Let your shoulders relax away from your ears, and allow your hands to rest comfortably in your lap or on your thighs. Close your eyes gently, or soften your gaze toward the floor if you prefer to keep them open. Some people find it easier to concentrate with eyes closed, while others feel more comfortable keeping them slightly open. There's no right or wrong choice. Use whatever helps you feel most relaxed and alert. Begin by simply noticing that you're breathing. You don't need to change your breath in any way. Don't make it deeper, slower, or different than it naturally wants to be. Just notice the simple fact that air is moving in and out of your body. This is your first step into meditation, pure, gentle awareness of something that's happening naturally. As you continue to observe your breath, you might notice where you feel it most clearly. Some people feel it at the nostrils, noticing the slight coolness as air enters and the warmth as it leaves. You might feel the gentle tickle of air passing through your nose, or notice how your nostrils naturally flare slightly on the inhale. Others feel it in the chest, watching the gentle rise and fall of breathing, feeling the expansion and contraction of the rib cage. Still others notice it in the belly, feeling the natural expansion and contraction of the abdomen with each breath. There's no right or wrong place to focus. Choose wherever you feel the breath most easily and naturally. Now comes the part that surprises many beginners. Within moments, probably within seconds, your mind will wander. Suddenly you'll find yourself thinking about what you need to do tomorrow, or replaying a conversation from earlier today, or wondering if you're meditating correctly, or planning your next meal, or remembering something you forgot to do. This is not a mistake. This is the human mind doing what human minds do. The moment you notice that your mind has wandered is actually a moment of awakening, a moment of mindfulness returning. When you notice your mind has wandered, simply and gently guide your attention back to the breath. There's no need for frustration or self-judgment. Don't scold yourself or feel like you failed. Think of it like training a puppy to walk on a leash. When the puppy wanders off to sniff something interesting, you don't scold it harshly. You gently guide it back to where you want it to go, with patience and kindness. This gentle returning is the heart of meditation practice. Some days your mind will feel relatively calm, and you'll be able to stay with the breath for longer periods. Other days your mind will feel like that frantic monkey, jumping from thought to thought with barely a pause. Both experiences are completely normal and valuable. The restless days teach you patience and persistence, while the calmer days give you a taste of the peace that's always available within you. Neither type of session is better or worse. They're simply different weather patterns in the sky of your mind. Let me share another story that illustrates the patient, persistent nature of this practice. There was once a meditation student named Maya who became very frustrated with her wandering mind. She came to her teacher and complained, "I've been practicing for months, but my mind seems more chaotic than when I started. During meditation, I notice how anxious and scattered my thoughts really are. I see how much I worry, how much I judge myself and others, how much mental noise I create. Am I getting worse instead of better? Maybe meditation isn't for me." Her teacher smiled knowingly and asked her to take a walk with him to a nearby village. As they walked along the dusty road, they passed a house where a woman was vigorously shaking out a large, ornate rug. Clouds of dust billowed out with each shake, filling the air around her and making the whole area look quite messy. "Look," the teacher said, "is that woman making the rug dirtier or cleaner?" "Cleaner, of course," Maya replied. "But there's so much dust flying around right now. It looks like she's making everything messier." "Exactly," the teacher nodded wisely. "The dust was always in the rug, but now it's becoming visible so it can be released. If she stopped shaking the rug because of all the dust in the air, the rug would remain dirty. Your mind was always busy and scattered, but before you began meditating, you weren't aware of it. You were lost in the mental activity, identified with every thought and emotion. Now you're becoming conscious of your mental patterns, which is the first step in freeing yourself from them. This increased awareness is not a sign that you're failing. It's proof that you're awakening." The student's face brightened with understanding. She realized that her growing awareness of her mind's busyness was actually progress, not failure. She was learning to observe her thoughts rather than being lost in them. This ability to step back and witness her mental activity was exactly what meditation was designed to cultivate. It was like waking up from a dream and realizing she had been dreaming. This brings us to a crucial understanding about meditation practice. Progress in meditation is not measured by how quiet your mind becomes, but by how aware you become of your mind's activity. A successful meditation session is not one where you have no thoughts, but one where you notice when you've been caught up in thoughts and gently return to your breath. Every return to the breath is a small victory, a moment of choosing presence over mental wandering. As you develop this practice, you'll begin to notice something beautiful happening. The capacity for gentle, non-judgmental awareness that you cultivate on the meditation cushion begins to show up in your daily life. You might catch yourself in the middle of a worry spiral and remember to take a conscious breath. You might notice when you're reacting emotionally to a situation and find a moment of space to respond more wisely. You might observe yourself getting frustrated in traffic and choose to use the red light as a reminder to breathe mindfully. This is meditation bearing fruit in the garden of everyday life. Let's explore some practical variations that can deepen your practice and accommodate different temperaments and preferences. One helpful technique is counting breaths. As you breathe naturally, silently count each exhale, 1 on the first exhale, 2 on the second, and so on up to 10. When you reach 10, start over at 1. If you lose count or find yourself at 15 or 20, simply smile gently at your wandering mind and start again at 1. This counting gives your mind a gentle task that helps maintain focus without being rigid or demanding. Another beautiful variation is what's called just sitting, or in Zen, shikantaza. In this practice, you sit with open awareness, not focusing on any particular object like the breath. Instead, you simply rest in pure awareness itself, noticing whatever arises, sounds, bodily sensations, thoughts, emotions, without getting caught up in any of it. It's like sitting in the center of your experience and watching life unfold around you, like being the sky that contains all weather without being disturbed by any of it. This open awareness practice can be particularly helpful for people who find focusing on the breath too narrow or restrictive. Some minds naturally prefer this broader, more spacious approach. You might spend some time with breath awareness and then transition into just sitting, or you might find that just sitting feels more natural from the beginning. There's no right or wrong way, only what serves your particular mind and temperament. For those who find it difficult to sit still, walking meditation offers a wonderful alternative. You can practice this indoors in a hallway or small room, or outdoors in a garden or quiet path. Walk very slowly, paying attention to each step, feeling your feet contact the ground, noticing the shift of weight from one foot to the other. When your mind wanders, gently bring your attention back to the simple sensations of walking. This practice is especially valuable for people who feel restless during sitting meditation. As your practice deepens, you may begin to experience what meditation teachers call the gap between thoughts. These are moments of pure awareness, where the mind naturally settles into stillness. In these gaps, there's no mental commentary, no inner dialogue, just pure, spacious awareness. These gaps might last only a second or two at first, but they offer a taste of your mind's natural peace. Don't try to create these moments or cling to them when they arise. They come and go naturally, like everything else in meditation. It's important to understand that meditation is not about achieving any particular state of mind. Some sessions you might feel deeply peaceful, others restless and agitated. Some days you might experience clarity and insight, other days confusion and dullness. All of these experiences are part of the practice. The goal is not to feel a certain way, but to develop the capacity to be present with whatever you're feeling. This acceptance of whatever arises is itself a profound teaching. In our daily lives, we spend enormous energy trying to feel good and avoid feeling bad. We chase pleasurable experiences and run from uncomfortable ones. Meditation teaches us a different way, the way of acceptance and presence. When we can be fully present with discomfort in meditation, we develop the capacity to be present with discomfort in life. This doesn't mean becoming passive, but rather responding to challenges from a place of centered awareness rather than reactive panic. Some practitioners find it helpful to use phrases or words synchronized with their breathing. You might think, breathing in on the inhale and breathing out on the exhale. Or you might use words that cultivate positive qualities, calm on the inhale, peaceful on the exhale. Other helpful combinations include let on the inhale and go on the exhale, or here on the inhale and now on the exhale. These verbal anchors can be especially helpful when the mind feels particularly scattered or when you're new to practice. The breath also teaches us about the natural rhythm of life. Each breath has a beginning, middle, and end. There's a natural pause after the exhale before the next inhale begins. By observing this rhythm, we learn to appreciate the natural cycles that govern all of life, the cycles of sleeping and waking, working and resting, effort and ease. This understanding helps us flow more gracefully with life's natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. As you work with breath awareness, you might notice how your breathing reflects your mental and emotional states. When you're anxious, your breath becomes shallow and rapid. When you're calm, it naturally deepens and slows. When you're angry, it might become sharp and irregular. When you're sad, it might become heavy and sighing. By observing your breath with gentle attention, you're also observing the subtle movements of your inner life. This awareness creates the possibility for change, not forced change, but natural transformation that happens when we see clearly. Remember that meditation is ultimately about developing a new relationship with your own mind. Instead of being at the mercy of every thought and emotion that arises, you learn to maintain a centered awareness that can observe all mental activity with compassion and wisdom. This doesn't happen overnight, but with patient, consistent practice, this capacity for mindful awareness becomes as natural as breathing itself. The beauty of meditation is its simplicity. You need no special equipment, no particular beliefs, no perfect conditions. You can practice for 5 minutes or 50, in a quiet room or on a busy subway. The only requirements are your willingness to be present and your breath. Everything else, the insights, the peace, the wisdom, emerges naturally from this simple foundation of gentle awareness. As we continue our journey together tonight, we'll explore how this foundation of meditation practice supports other aspects of the Buddhist path. We'll discover how loving-kindness meditation can heal our relationships, how mindfulness can transform our daily activities, and how the insights that arise from sitting quietly can illuminate the deepest questions of human existence. For now, simply rest in the understanding that you've been introduced to one of humanity's most precious gifts, the ability to find peace within yourself, regardless of external circumstances. This is not just an ancient practice, but a living tool that can transform your experience of being alive. Every breath you take mindfully is a step toward the freedom and peace that are your birthright. As we settle deeper into our evening together, I want to pause and acknowledge something beautiful happening right now across the world. If it feels right to you, take a moment to imagine all the people who might be listening to these same words. Someone lying peacefully in bed in Japan as dawn breaks. Another person finding comfort during a sleepless night in London. Someone driving home from work in California. Or perhaps a parent finally getting a quiet moment in Australia. We're all here together in this invisible circle of peace, each seeking the same fundamental thing, relief from suffering and the warmth of genuine happiness. Now that we've explored the foundation of meditation and learned to work gently with our wandering minds, we're ready to discover one of Buddhism's most transformative practices, loving kindness meditation. This isn't just a technique, it's a way of training your heart to become a source of healing, both for yourself and everyone around you. In traditional Buddhist teaching, loving kindness is called metta, which literally means friendship, the kind of warm, unconditional friendship you might feel towards someone you care about deeply. But this practice goes beyond ordinary friendship to cultivate a love that asks for nothing in return, a compassion that flows freely without conditions or expectations. It's the kind of love that recognizes the basic goodness in all beings, even when that goodness is temporarily hidden by pain, fear, or anger. Before we begin exploring this practice, let me share a story that captures its essence beautifully. Long ago, in ancient India, there lived a merchant named Ananda who traveled frequently between villages, buying and selling goods to support his large family. Ananda was known throughout the region as a fair and honest man, but he carried a heavy burden in his heart. Years earlier, Ananda's younger brother had borrowed money from him to start his own business, promising to repay the debt within a year. When the year passed with no payment, Ananda's brother avoided him, eventually moving to a distant village. The money represented Ananda's life savings, and its loss had forced his family into hardship. Worse than the financial strain was the pain of betrayal by someone he had loved and trusted completely. For 3 years, Ananda carried this wound like a stone in his chest. He would lie awake at night, replaying the betrayal, imagining confrontations with his brother, and planning what he would say if they ever met again. The anger and hurt colored every aspect of his life. He became suspicious of other people's motives, harsh with his own children when they made mistakes, and bitter about the unfairness of life. One day, while traveling through a village he had never visited before, Ananda encountered an old monk sitting peacefully under a banyan tree. Something about the monk's serene presence drew Ananda to sit beside him. Soon, he found himself pouring out his story of betrayal and the anger that had consumed him for years. The monk listened with infinite patience, nodding with understanding at each painful detail. When Ananda finished speaking, the monk was quiet for a long moment before saying gently, "My friend, you speak of carrying a heavy burden, but I want you to consider something. Who is this anger really punishing?" Ananda looked confused. "What do you mean?" "My brother betrayed me. He deserves my anger." The monk smiled with infinite compassion. "Tell me, where is your brother right now?" "I don't know," Ananda replied. "Far away, probably living happily while I suffer." "So your brother is living his life, wherever he may be, while you carry the poison of anger every day. You drink this poison hoping it will hurt him, but you are the only one who suffers from it. Your anger has stolen 3 years of your life, created distance between you and your children, and turned your heart into a wasteland. Is this the punishment you intended? The truth of these words hit Ananda like a physical blow. He realized that his anger had indeed punished only himself, while his brother remained untouched by it. But how can I let go? How can I forgive what he did? Doesn't he need to face consequences for his actions? He asked desperately. The monk leaned forward with gentle eyes. Forgiveness doesn't mean approving of what someone did or pretending it didn't happen. Forgiveness means freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. Your brother will face the consequences of his actions in his own life, in his own time, through the natural law of cause and effect. But you don't need to be his judge and executioner. You can choose to be free. The monk then taught Ananda a simple practice. Begin each day by sending loving wishes to yourself. May I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be free from suffering. When this feels natural, extend these same wishes to your wife and children. Then, gradually include friends, neighbors, even strangers. And when you feel ready, perhaps in weeks, perhaps in months, include your brother in these loving wishes. Ananda was skeptical. How can I wish happiness for someone who hurt me so deeply? The monk replied, You're not doing it for him, you're doing it for yourself. Every moment you spend in hatred, you move further from your own peace. Every moment you spend in loving kindness, you move closer to freedom. Over the following months, Ananda practiced faithfully. At first, even wishing himself happiness felt strange and difficult. He discovered how harsh his inner voice had become, how little compassion he showed himself for his own mistakes and struggles. Gradually, as he learned to speak to himself with kindness, the knot of anger in his chest began to soften. Extending loving wishes to his family felt more natural, and he noticed immediate changes in his relationships. His children began approaching him more freely, sensing the warmth returning to his heart. His wife, who had borne the weight of his bitterness for years, began to smile more often. The real test came months later when Ananda finally felt ready to include his brother in his loving kindness practice. At first, he could only manage a few words. May my brother be safe from harm. But even this small gesture created a profound shift. He realized that somewhere beneath his anger, he still loved his brother and wanted him to be happy. A year after meeting the monk, Ananda received word that his brother had been asking about him, apparently wanting to make amends. When they finally met, Ananda found that his heart held no anger, only sadness for the years they had lost and gratitude for the opportunity to reconcile. His brother, weeping, confessed that his own guilt and shame had kept him away. He had thought about Ananda every day, wanting to make things right but not knowing how. The money was eventually repaid, but Ananda realized that the greatest gift was not the return of his savings, but the return of his peace. The loving kindness practice had not only healed his relationship with his brother, it had healed his relationship with life itself. This story illustrates the profound power of loving kindness, meditation. It's not about becoming a doormat or pretending that harmful actions are acceptable. Rather, it's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying resentment and choosing to respond to life's difficulties from a place of wisdom and compassion rather than reactive anger. The Buddha taught that hatred is never overcome by hatred, but only by love. This isn't naive idealism, it's practical psychology. When we respond to anger with anger, we simply escalate conflict and increase suffering for everyone involved. When we respond to anger with compassion, we create the possibility for healing and transformation. In our modern world, we're constantly exposed to reasons to be angry, fearful, or judgmental. News of violence, injustice, and suffering can leave us feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Social media often amplifies our differences and encourages us to see others as enemies rather than fellow human beings struggling with their own pain. Loving kindness meditation offers an antidote to this toxicity, training our hearts to remain open and compassionate even in difficult circumstances. Let's explore how to begin this transformative practice. Find a comfortable position and allow your breathing to settle naturally. We'll start, as Ananda learned to do, by offering loving kindness to yourself. This is often the most challenging part for many people, especially if you're used to being self-critical or feeling unworthy of love and happiness. Place your hand gently on your heart and begin with simple, sincere wishes for your own well-being. You might use traditional phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering." Or you might find words that feel more natural to you. May I be kind to myself. May I feel loved. May I find peace in my heart. Don't worry if these phrases feel awkward or insincere at first. Many of us have spent years being our own harshest critics, so self-compassion can feel foreign initially. Simply repeat the phrases with gentle intention, like planting seeds in the garden of your heart. With time and practice, these wishes will become more natural and heartfelt. As you offer these loving wishes to yourself, you might notice resistance or skepticism arising. Your mind might say things like, "I don't deserve to be happy," or "This is silly and pointless." Simply acknowledge these thoughts with kindness and return to your practice. Remember, you're training a muscle that may have been neglected for years. Be patient with the process. Once offering loving kindness to yourself begins to feel more comfortable, you can expand your practice to include others. Start with someone you love unconditionally, perhaps a child, a dear friend, or a beloved pet. Bring this being to mind with as much detail as possible. See their face, remember their smile, feel the warmth of your connection. Then offer them the same loving wishes. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be at peace, may you be free from suffering. Notice how it feels to send these loving wishes to someone you care about. Most people find this part of the practice comes easily and feels quite natural. This is your heart's natural capacity for love, the same capacity that can be extended to all beings with practice. Next, you can include neutral people in your practice, perhaps a cashier you encountered today, a neighbor you don't know well, or someone you passed on the street. These are people who evoke neither strong positive nor negative feelings. Bringing them to mind and offering loving wishes helps you recognize that even strangers deserve happiness and freedom from suffering. This practice gradually dissolves the artificial barriers we create between us and them. The most challenging and transformative part of loving kindness meditation involves including difficult people in your practice. Start with someone who has caused you minor irritation rather than deep hurt. Perhaps that colleague who interrupts in meetings, or the neighbor whose dog barks too early in the morning. Recognize that these people, like you, are struggling with their own pain and confusion. Their irritating behavior often comes from their own suffering. As you offer loving wishes to difficult people, you're not condoning their harmful actions or making yourself vulnerable to further hurt. You're simply recognizing their basic humanity and freeing yourself from the poison of resentment. You might need to start with very basic wishes like, may this person be free from the pain that causes them to hurt others. Or even, may this person be safe and far away from me. Any genuine wish for their well-being, however small, plants seeds of forgiveness in your heart. Here's another story that illustrates how loving kindness can transform even our most difficult relationships. In a busy office in modern Tokyo, there worked a young woman named Yuki who dreaded coming to work each day because of her supervisor, Mr. Tanaka. Mr. Tanaka was demanding, critical, and never seemed satisfied with anyone's work. He would publicly embarrass employees for small mistakes and took credit for others' successes. Yuki found herself losing sleep, developing headaches, and feeling constantly anxious. One evening, feeling desperate for relief, Yuki stumbled across an article about loving kindness meditation. She was skeptical but willing to try anything to reduce her stress. Following the instructions, she began with loving wishes for herself, then her family, then gradually worked her way up to including Mr. Tanaka in her practice. The first time she tried to send loving wishes to her difficult supervisor, she could barely whisper, "May you be happy," without feeling angry. But she persisted, night after night, gradually feeling the knot of resentment in her chest begin to soften. After several weeks of practice, something remarkable happened. During a particularly stressful meeting where Mr. Tanaka was berating a teammate, Yuki found herself really looking at her supervisor for the first time. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when he spoke. Suddenly, she saw not a monster, but a human being who was clearly suffering. She realized that his harsh behavior came from his own pain and insecurity. This shift in perception didn't make Mr. Tanaka's behavior acceptable, but it freed Yuki from taking it personally. She began responding to his criticism with calm professionalism, instead of defensive anger. When he was particularly harsh, she would silently offer him loving wishes, recognizing that he was probably having a difficult day. Interestingly, as Yuki's energy toward Mr. Tanaka shifted from resentment to compassion, his behavior toward her began to change as well. He started giving her more challenging assignments and occasionally even thanked her for her work. Later, Yuki learned that Mr. Tanaka was going through a difficult divorce and caring for his sick mother, circumstances that explained, though didn't excuse, his stressed behavior. Yuki's practice of loving kindness not only improved her work environment, but taught her a valuable lesson. Most people who act badly are suffering themselves. This doesn't mean we should tolerate abuse or fail to protect ourselves from harmful behavior. Rather, it means we can choose to respond from a place of wisdom and compassion rather than reactive anger. The beautiful thing about loving kindness practice is that it naturally generates what Buddhists call mudita, sympathetic joy, or the ability to feel happy when others are happy. In our competitive culture, we're often trained to feel envious when others succeed, or to see their happiness as somehow diminishing our own. Loving kindness meditation dissolves this illusion of scarcity and helps us recognize that happiness, like love, multiplies when shared. You can practice loving kindness anywhere, not just during formal meditation. While walking down the street, you can silently offer loving wishes to the people you pass. While stuck in traffic, you can send compassion to the frustrated drivers around you. While watching the news, you can offer loving kindness to both the victims and perpetrators of violence, recognizing that both groups are caught in cycles of suffering. One of the most powerful applications of loving kindness meditation is in dealing with difficult emotions. When you're feeling angry, sad, anxious, or overwhelmed, you can turn toward these emotions with the same loving kindness you would offer a distressed friend. Instead of fighting your emotions or judging yourself for having them, you can acknowledge them with compassion. Oh, there's anger arising, and that's okay. May this anger be met with understanding. May I be kind to myself in this difficult moment. This approach to emotions is revolutionary for many people. We're often taught to see difficult emotions as problems to be solved or weaknesses to be overcome. But Buddhist psychology recognizes that emotions are simply energy moving through our system. They arise, peak, and naturally dissolve when we don't resist them. By meeting our emotions with loving kindness instead of resistance, we allow them to flow through us more easily. Let me share a simple practice you can use the next time you're feeling stressed or upset. First, take a few conscious breaths to ground yourself in the present moment. Then place your hand on your heart and acknowledge what you're feeling. This is a moment of suffering, or this is really difficult right now. Don't try to fix or change anything. Just acknowledge the reality of your experience. Next, remind yourself that suffering is part of the human experience. Pain and difficulty are part of life. I'm not alone in feeling this way. Millions of people around the world are struggling with similar challenges right now. This recognition helps counteract the isolation and self-pity that often accompany difficult emotions. Finally, offer yourself the same kindness you would give to a good friend facing the same challenge. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. May I find the strength to work through this difficulty. You might imagine wrapping yourself in a warm, loving embrace, or visualize a wise, compassionate figure offering you comfort and support. This practice of self-compassion is not self-indulgence or self-pity. Research shows that people who treat themselves with kindness during difficult times are more resilient, less likely to develop depression, and better able to learn from their mistakes. When you're harsh and critical with yourself, you activate your threat detection system, making it harder to think clearly and respond wisely. When you're kind and supportive with yourself, you create the emotional safety needed for healing and growth. Loving kindness meditation also offers practical benefits for physical health. Studies have shown that regular practice can lower blood pressure, reduce chronic pain, improve immune function, and slow cellular aging. The practice activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's relaxation response, while deactivating the stress response that contributes to so many modern health problems. But perhaps the most beautiful benefit of loving kindness practice is how it gradually transforms your experience of daily life. As your heart becomes more open and compassionate, you begin to see the basic goodness in people and situations that previously irritated or frightened you. You become a source of calm and healing in a world that desperately needs both. Your very presence begins to uplift others, creating ripples of positivity that extend far beyond what you can see or measure. The Buddha taught that loving kindness is like the sun. It shines equally on everyone without discrimination. A loving heart doesn't choose to love only beautiful people or only those who are kind in return. Just as the sun's warmth is available to all beings regardless of their worthiness, loving kindness flows freely to all life. This doesn't mean being naive about people's capacity for harm, but rather maintaining an open heart while exercising appropriate wisdom and boundaries. As you continue to explore this practice, remember that loving kindness is not a feeling you need to manufacture or force. It's more like removing the barriers that prevent your heart's natural compassion from flowing. Some days the practice will feel warm and flowing, other days it might feel mechanical or difficult. Both experiences are valuable and normal. The intention to cultivate love and compassion is itself a form of love and compassion. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, you might experiment with sending loving wishes to everyone who has touched your life today, the people you interacted with directly, the people who grew your food, made your clothes, built your home, and those who will care for the world while you sleep. Feel yourself connected to the vast web of humanity, all beings seeking happiness and freedom from suffering, just as you are. In this spirit of universal loving kindness, may you rest peacefully tonight. May your heart be filled with warmth and compassion. May you wake tomorrow with renewed energy to bring kindness into the world. And may all beings everywhere be happy, healthy, peaceful, and free. As we journey deeper into this peaceful evening together, I want you to know that wherever you are in the world right now, whether you're listening while lying in bed, sitting quietly in your favorite chair, or perhaps walking under the stars, you're exactly where you need to be. If it feels right, take a moment to adjust your position, perhaps pulling a soft blanket closer, or simply letting your shoulders drop with your next exhale. Tonight we're going to explore one of life's most challenging yet liberating lessons, the art of letting go. In the gentle wisdom of Buddhism, there's a beautiful understanding that most of our suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from our resistance to what happens to us. We cling desperately to things we want to stay the same, and we fight against changes we don't want to face. But life, in its infinite wisdom, has a different plan. Everything in existence is constantly changing, constantly flowing, constantly teaching us that peace comes not from controlling life, but from learning to dance with its natural rhythms. The Buddha once said, "Attachment is the root of suffering," but this teaching is often misunderstood. He wasn't suggesting that we should stop caring about people, dreams, or meaningful pursuits. Rather, he was pointing to the difference between love and clinging, between caring and desperate attachment. When we love with an open hand, we can experience deep connection without the constant fear of loss that makes us miserable. Let me share with you a story that captures this truth in the most tender way. In a small village in ancient Japan, there lived an elderly woman named Grandmother Hana, who was beloved by everyone for her serene wisdom and gentle smile. People would travel from neighboring villages just to sit with her and feel the peace that seemed to radiate from her very being. Children would gather around her in the evenings to hear her stories, and troubled adults would seek her counsel during difficult times. What made Grandmother Hana so special was not that her life had been easy, quite the opposite. She had lost her husband in a war, raised 3 children alone through years of poverty, and survived famines, floods, and countless other hardships. Yet somehow, each difficulty had only deepened her compassion and strengthened her inner peace. She had learned something precious that most people spend their whole lives seeking: how to hold life lightly while loving it deeply. One day, a young mother named Keiko came to Grandmother Hana in terrible distress. Her 5-year-old daughter, little Sakura, had fallen gravely ill, and despite the efforts of all the healers in the region, the child was not improving. Keiko wept as she spoke, her words tumbling out between sobs. "Grandmother Hana, I cannot bear the thought of losing my precious daughter. She is my whole world, my reason for living. I lie awake at night, imagining life without her, and the pain is unbearable. Please, tell me what I must do to save her. I would give anything, do anything, sacrifice everything if it would make her well." Grandmother Hana listened with infinite compassion, her old hands gently holding Keiko's trembling ones. She could feel the young mother's anguish as if it were her own, remembering her own moments of desperate fear when her children were small. When Keiko finished speaking, Hana was quiet for a long moment, her eyes soft with understanding. Finally, she spoke in a voice as gentle as morning mist. "My dear child, come with me to my garden. There is something I want to show you that might bring you peace." Together, they walked to the back of Hana's simple house, where a beautiful garden flourished despite the late autumn season. The garden was clearly tended with great love. Stone pathways wound between carefully placed plants. A small pond reflected the changing sky, and flowering bushes provided spots of color even in the fading season. Hana led Keiko to a magnificent cherry tree that stood at the center of the garden, its branches now bare except for a few late-falling leaves that clung stubbornly to the twigs. "Do you see this tree?" Hana asked gently, placing her weathered hand on the smooth bark. "I planted it the year my first child was born, 40 years ago. In spring, it bursts with the most beautiful blossoms, clouds of pink and white that take your breath away and fill the air with the sweetest fragrance. In summer, its green leaves provide cooling shade where children play and lovers whisper. In autumn, its leaves turn brilliant gold and red before falling to nourish the earth. And in winter, it stands gracefully bare, resting and gathering strength for spring's return." Keiko looked at the tree, not understanding what this had to do with her daughter's illness. Her mind was consumed with worry, and she felt impatient with what seemed like a distraction from her urgent need. Hana continued, sensing the young mother's restlessness, but knowing the importance of this teaching. "Each season, this tree is perfect, exactly as it is. When the blossoms fall, the tree doesn't cling to them or weep for their loss. When the leaves change color and drop, the tree doesn't resist the transformation or fight against the natural order. It understands something that we humans often forget, that beauty lies not in permanence, but in the graceful acceptance of life's natural cycles. "But grandmother," Keiko protested, her voice breaking with desperation, "my daughter is not a tree. She is my baby, my heart walking around outside my body. How can I accept that she might be taken from me? How can I just stand by and watch her suffer? What kind of mother would I be if I simply accepted this?" Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, and her whole body shook with the force of her grief. Hana's eyes filled with the deepest compassion, remembering her own moments of helpless terror when her children faced danger. She drew Keiko into a gentle embrace, letting the young mother cry against her shoulder. "Sweet Keiko," she whispered, "I am not asking you to give up hope or stop fighting for your daughter's health. Do everything in your power to help her heal. Seek the best healers. Try every treatment. Pray to whatever gods bring you comfort. But I am asking you to consider this. Your daughter, like all of us, is a temporary gift in this world. From the moment she was born, she began the journey that all beings take, a journey with a beginning, a middle, and an end. This doesn't make her life less precious. It makes every moment with her infinitely sacred." Hana guided Keiko to sit on a small stone bench beneath the cherry tree, brushing away the fallen leaves to make space. The late afternoon light filtered through the bare branches, creating delicate shadows on the ground. When we cling too tightly to what we love, we often miss the joy of loving. Your fear of losing Sakura is stealing your ability to fully experience the love you have for her right now. Every moment you spend worrying about a future you cannot control is a moment not spent cherishing the present gift of her existence. Are you truly seeing her when you look at her now, or are you seeing your fear of losing her? This question struck Keiko like a physical blow. She realized that for weeks, when she looked at her daughter, she hadn't been seeing Sakura's bright eyes or sweet smile. Instead, she had been seeing her own terror reflected back at her. She had been so focused on the possibility of death that she was missing the reality of life happening right in front of her. The old woman picked up a fallen leaf from the ground, golden and perfect in its autumn beauty, its edges crisp and veins clearly visible in the fading light. This leaf was once part of the tree, drawing life from its branches, dancing in the wind, providing shade and beauty. When its time came, it let go gracefully, trusting that its purpose was complete. Now it will nourish the earth and help new life grow in the spring. Nothing is ever truly lost. It only changes form, transforms into something new, continues the eternal dance of existence in ways we cannot always see. Keiko sat in silence, feeling something shift deep within her heart. She realized that her desperate clinging to her daughter, her frantic attempts to control an outcome she couldn't control, were indeed stealing her ability to be fully present with Sakura. She had been so focused on the possibility of loss that she was missing the reality of love that surrounded her every day. "What should I do?" Keiko asked quietly, her voice now soft with beginning understanding. Hana smiled with infinite tenderness. "Go home and love your daughter with all your heart, but love her as she is, not as your fear paints her. Read her stories, sing her songs, hold her close, and feel the warmth of her small body. Continue to seek healing for her, but don't let fear rob you of the precious time you have together. And if the time comes when you must let her go, do so with the same grace as this tree releasing its leaves, with love, gratitude, and trust in the natural order of things that connects us all. Months later, by what many called a miracle, little Sakura recovered completely. But Keiko never forgot the lesson of the cherry tree. She learned to love her daughter fully, while holding that love lightly, cherishing each day without being paralyzed by fear of future loss. And when, many years later, she faced other losses and changes in her life, the death of her parents, her husband's departure for work in a distant city, her daughter's eventual marriage, and move to another village, she remembered Grandmother Hannah's wisdom about dancing with life's natural rhythms, rather than fighting against them. This story illustrates one of Buddhism's most profound teachings, the reality of impermanence. Everything in existence is constantly changing. Our bodies age and transform. Our relationships evolve and sometimes end. Our circumstances shift like weather patterns. Our thoughts and emotions arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. This isn't a problem to be solved, but a fundamental characteristic of life, to be accepted and even celebrated. The Buddha taught that recognizing impermanence is actually liberating, not depressing. When we truly understand that everything changes, we stop wasting enormous amounts of energy trying to freeze life in perfect moments. We stop living in constant terror of future loss and start appreciating the precious gift of what we have right now. We learn to love fully while holding lightly, to care deeply while accepting uncertainty. In our modern world, we're often taught to believe the opposite. We're encouraged to seek security, permanence, guarantees in every aspect of our lives. We buy insurance policies for every possible disaster, make detailed 5-year plans, and try to control every variable in our existence. While some planning and preparation are wise and necessary, the illusion that we can control outcomes often creates more anxiety than comfort. We exhaust ourselves trying to build walls against change, not realizing that the walls themselves become prisons. Think about your own experience for a moment. How much of your daily worry and stress comes from trying to control things that are ultimately beyond your control? How much energy do you spend fighting against changes that are already happening or have already happened? How often do you miss the beauty of the present moment because you're anxiously focused on preserving it or preventing future difficulties? Consider how exhausting it is to carry the impossible responsibility of controlling an uncontrollable world. Let me share another story that shows how embracing impermanence can transform our relationship with uncertainty and turn what feels like loss into unexpected freedom. In a bustling modern city, there lived a successful businessman named David, who prided himself on having his life perfectly organized and controlled. He had detailed plans for his career advancement, his financial investments, his family life, and even his retirement decades in the future. Every aspect of his existence was scheduled, insured, backup planned, and contingency prepared. His home was immaculate, his calendar was color-coded, and his emergency fund could cover any conceivable disaster. David felt pride in his careful planning and often looked down on people who seemed to live more spontaneously. He believed that success in life came from anticipating every possibility and preparing for every outcome. His family and friends knew him as reliable, responsible, and always in control. But beneath this successful exterior, David lived with constant low-level anxiety, always scanning for potential problems and threats to his carefully constructed life. David's perfectly ordered world came crashing down when he was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune condition that forced him to take early retirement from his high-stress job. All his careful plans became irrelevant overnight. His identity as a successful executive, his financial security, his vision of the future, everything he had built his sense of self upon was suddenly uncertain. The illness made it impossible for him to maintain his demanding schedule, and the medical treatments drained both his energy and his savings. For months, David raged against this turn of events with the same determination he had once applied to his business deals. He spent his days researching treatments, seeking second opinions from specialists across the country, and making elaborate new plans to regain control of his life. He created detailed charts tracking his symptoms, scheduled his medications with military precision, and turned his healing into another project to be managed and controlled. But the harder he fought against his new reality, the more exhausted and depressed he became. His family watched helplessly as David consumed himself with desperate attempts to return to his old life. His wife begged him to slow down and accept help, but he insisted he could handle everything himself if he just planned carefully enough. His children began avoiding him because every conversation became about his illness, his treatments, or his frustrated plans for recovery. He was fighting so hard against what was happening that he was missing the life that was still available to him. One day, feeling utterly defeated after a disappointing doctor's appointment, David wandered into a small bookstore near the medical center. He wasn't particularly spiritual or interested in philosophy, but something about a simple book titled "Finding Peace in Uncertainty" drew his attention. The cover showed a single leaf floating on water, and for reasons he couldn't explain, the image calmed something inside him. As he read, David encountered the story of a Zen master who, when asked about the secret to happiness in an unpredictable world, simply said, "What is, is. What isn't, isn't." Fighting with reality is like arguing with the weather, exhausting and pointless. This simple phrase stopped David in his tracks. He realized that he had been fighting against reality itself, fighting against the fact that he was sick, fighting against the uncertainty of his future, fighting against the fundamental truth that life doesn't follow our plans, no matter how detailed they are. He saw that his suffering wasn't coming primarily from his illness, but from his furious resistance to his illness. He was wasting his limited energy on a battle he could never win. Slowly, with great difficulty, David began to practice acceptance. Instead of spending his days planning his return to his old career, he began to explore what life might offer him in his current circumstances. He discovered a love of gardening that he had never had time for before, finding peace in working with soil and watching plants grow at their own pace. He began volunteering at a local shelter, finding deep meaning in helping others who were also facing uncertainty and hardship. Most importantly, David started really listening to his wife and children for the first time in years, building relationships that had been neglected during his busy career. He learned that his daughter had been struggling with anxiety at school, something he had never noticed during his obsession with work. He discovered that his wife had dreams and talents he had never taken time to appreciate. His forced slowdown allowed him to see the richness that had been present in his life all along but hidden beneath his relentless busyness. Most surprisingly, David's health began to improve as his stress levels decreased and he learned to work with his condition rather than against it. His doctors were amazed by his progress, attributing it partly to his positive attitude and significantly reduced anxiety. But even more important than his physical healing was his emotional transformation. He learned that true security doesn't come from controlling external circumstances, but from developing the inner flexibility to adapt gracefully to whatever life brings. David's story shows us that letting go isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about distinguishing between what we can control and what we cannot, and putting our energy into what actually makes a difference. We can control our responses to situations, but we cannot control the situations themselves. We can control how we treat ourselves and others, but we cannot control how others treat us. We can control our effort and intention, but we cannot control outcomes. This wisdom is beautifully captured in what's called the serenity prayer, though its essence appears in many spiritual traditions across cultures and centuries. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Buddhist teaching offers a specific practice for developing this wisdom called letting go meditation. It's simple yet profound, and you can practice it right now as you listen, allowing these words to guide you into a direct experience of release. Begin by bringing to mind something you've been struggling to control or something you're afraid of losing. It might be a relationship that's changing, a job situation that's uncertain, concerns about your health or that of someone you love, or even a worry about the future that keeps you awake at night. Notice how it feels in your body to hold on to this concern. You might feel tension in your shoulders, tightness in your chest, or a knot in your stomach. This physical discomfort is your body's way of showing you the cost of clinging, the actual pain that resistance creates. Now, imagine placing this concern in your open palms, like holding a small bird that needs to fly free. Take a deep breath and, as you exhale slowly and completely, visualize opening your hands and allowing the bird to fly free. You're not abandoning your care or concern, but you're releasing your desperate need to control the outcome. You might say to yourself, I care about this deeply, and I release my need to control it. I will do what I can with love and wisdom, and trust life to handle the rest. Notice how your body feels after this visualization. Many people experience a sense of lightness, relief, or expansion. This is what it feels like to hold things lightly rather than gripping them tightly. You still care, but you're no longer carrying the impossible burden of trying to control uncontrollable outcomes. The practice of letting go extends to our emotions as well. One of the most liberating discoveries in Buddhist psychology is that emotions, like everything else in existence, are impermanent. No matter how intense an emotion feels in the moment, no matter how convinced you are that it will last forever, it will change and transform. Sadness will lift, anger will cool, fear will pass, anxiety will ease, and even joy will transform into something else. This understanding can be tremendously comforting when you're in the midst of difficult feelings. Understanding this doesn't mean we should suppress our emotions or pretend they don't matter. Rather, it means we can experience them fully without being overwhelmed by them or believing they define us. We can feel sad without believing we'll never be happy again. We can feel angry without being consumed by rage. We can feel afraid without being paralyzed by terror. We can experience anxiety without believing something is fundamentally wrong with us. Here's a gentle practice for working with difficult emotions that arise in your daily life. The next time you're experiencing something challenging, anxiety about the future, sadness about a loss, anger at an injustice, or frustration with circumstances, try this compassionate approach. First, notice the emotion without immediately trying to fix it, push it away, or judge yourself for having it. You might say to yourself, "Oh, there's anxiety arising," or "I notice sadness is here right now," or "anger is moving through me." Next, remind yourself that this emotion is temporary. This feeling is here now, but it will change. Like all emotions, it has arisen and it will pass away. I don't need to hold on to it or push it away. I can simply let it be here while it's here. Then, instead of fighting the emotion or being swept away by it, breathe with it gently. Imagine your breath flowing around the emotion, not trying to dissolve it, but simply keeping it company with kindness. Finally, offer yourself the same compassion you would give to a beloved friend experiencing the same difficulty. This is hard right now, and that's okay. It's natural and human to feel this way given what I'm going through. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I treat myself with the same tenderness I would show to someone I love. This approach transforms your relationship with difficult emotions from one of resistance and struggle to one of acceptance and self-compassion. You're not trying to feel better immediately, but you're creating the conditions that allow natural healing to occur. Like David learning to work with his illness rather than against it, you're learning to work with your emotions rather than exhaust yourself fighting them. The art of letting go also applies to our thoughts and mental patterns that no longer serve us. Many of us carry stories about ourselves and our lives that have become prison walls rather than helpful guides. We might cling to identity labels that limit our growth and possibilities. I'm not good at relationships. I'm always anxious. I'm not creative. I'm too old to change. Or I'm not the kind of person who can be happy. But these stories about ourselves are just thoughts, and thoughts can change when we stop believing them completely. Buddhist teaching encourages us to hold our self-concepts lightly, recognizing them as mental constructions rather than ultimate truths. You are not your thoughts about yourself. You are not your past mistakes or your future fears. You are not even your current circumstances. You are the aware presence that observes all these mental phenomena arising and passing away like clouds in the vast sky of consciousness. This awareness is vast, spacious, and unlimited by the small stories the mind creates. Let me share one final story that illustrates the profound freedom that comes from truly understanding impermanence and learning to let life flow through us rather than around us. In ancient China, there lived a farmer whose life seemed to be an endless series of changes, some that others called fortunate, and some that others called tragic. This farmer had learned something that made him different from his neighbors. He never got caught up in judging events as simply good or bad. When his prized horse ran away one morning, his neighbors gathered around him saying, "Oh, how terrible this is. You've lost your most valuable possession. What bad luck has befallen you?" The farmer listened to their sympathy and simply replied, "Maybe. We'll see." The next day, the horse returned with several wild horses following behind. The neighbors exclaimed with excitement, "How wonderful! Now you have many horses instead of just one. What incredible good fortune!" Again, the farmer's response remained calm and measured, "Maybe. We'll see." When his son tried to tame one of the wild horses and broke his leg in the process, the neighbors lamented loudly, "How awful this is! Your son is injured and cannot help with the farming. What a disaster!" The farmer's response remained the same, "Maybe. We'll see." When war broke out and all the young men in the village were conscripted to fight, except his son, who couldn't serve due to his broken leg, the neighbors celebrated the farmer's good fortune. "How lucky you are that your son cannot go to war. He will be safe, while others face danger. What a blessing this injury turned out to be." Once again, the wise farmer simply said, "Maybe. We'll see." The story continues endlessly, each apparent blessing becoming a complication, each seeming disaster opening unexpected possibilities. But the farmer understood something profound that allowed him to remain peaceful through all these changes. Life is too complex and interconnected for us to judge any single event as purely good or bad. What appears to be a disaster today might lead to unexpected blessings tomorrow. What seems like good fortune now might create challenges later. The wise response is not to cling desperately to the good or resist frantically the bad, but to remain open and responsive to whatever life brings. This doesn't mean the farmer was indifferent or emotionally disconnected. He undoubtedly felt concern when his horse ran away, and joy when it returned with companions. He probably worried about his injured son and felt relief when the boy was spared from war. But he held all these experiences lightly, understanding that each was just one chapter in an ever-unfolding story whose ultimate meaning couldn't be judged from any single page. This is the essence of what Buddhists call equanimity, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to remain balanced and responsive regardless of circumstances. It's like being a tree that bends gracefully in the wind without breaking, or like water that flows around obstacles without losing its essential nature. It's the peace that comes from dancing with life rather than wrestling with it. As we near the end of this section of our journey together, I want to offer you a profound truth that can transform your entire experience of being alive. Everything you're clinging to right now, your possessions, your relationships, your plans, your identity, your problems, even your beliefs about what your life should look like, you will eventually have to let go of anyway. This isn't morbid or depressing. It's the most liberating truth you can embrace. When you truly understand this, you can begin to love more fully, live more freely, and find peace in the midst of life's constant changes. The invitation is not to love less or care less, but to love and care with an open hand. Cherish what you have while you have it, and when change comes, as it always does, let it flow through you rather than around you. Trust that just as spring follows winter in the natural world, new possibilities will emerge from every ending in your life. The farmer's story reminds us that what looks like an ending might actually be a beginning we haven't yet recognized. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you might practice letting go of the day that's ending. Release any mistakes or regrets, any unfinished business or unresolved concerns. Let the day dissolve into memory, trusting that whatever needs to be carried forward will naturally arise when needed. Allow yourself to enter sleep as a practice in letting go, surrendering consciousness temporarily, trusting that you'll awaken when the time is right, renewed and ready for whatever tomorrow brings. In this spirit of gentle release, may you rest peacefully in the understanding that letting go is not about losing what you love, but about loving so fully that you can hold everything lightly. May you find freedom in uncertainty and peace in the constant flow of change. And may your dreams tonight carry you into the deep rest that comes when we stop fighting life and start dancing with it instead. As our evening together deepens and these ancient teachings begin to settle into your heart, perhaps you're wondering how all this beautiful wisdom translates into the reality of Monday morning. How do you carry the peace we've discovered tonight into a world of deadlines, difficult conversations, traffic jams, and endless responsibilities? The answer lies in understanding that Buddhism isn't something you practice only during quiet moments of meditation. It's a way of being that can transform every aspect of your daily life. Buddhism teaches us that enlightenment isn't found by escaping the world, but by engaging with it more skillfully. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to practice compassion. Each challenge offers a chance to develop patience. Ordinary moments, washing dishes, commuting to work, listening to a friend, become doorways to presence and peace. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this integration of spiritual practice with everyday life. In modern-day San Francisco, there worked a nurse named Maria who had been practicing meditation for several years. She could sit in perfect stillness for an hour each morning, experiencing deep peace and clarity. But the moment she arrived at the busy hospital where she worked, that peace seemed to evaporate instantly. The hospital environment was everything her meditation cushion wasn't: chaotic, noisy, unpredictable, emotionally charged. Patients were frightened and sometimes hostile. Families were anxious and demanding. Her colleagues were stressed and overworked. By the end of most shifts, Maria felt as if she were two different people, the peaceful meditator and the frazzled nurse, with no bridge between them. Frustrated by this disconnection, Maria sought guidance from her meditation teacher, an elderly woman named Sarah, who had spent decades studying both Zen Buddhism and Western psychology. "I can find peace in my bedroom," Maria confessed, "but I lose it the moment I step into the real world. What's the point of meditation if it doesn't help me when I need it most?" Sarah smiled with understanding. "Tell me, when you're meditating at home, what makes you feel peaceful?" Maria thought for a moment. "The quiet, I suppose. The stillness. No one demanding anything from me. Time to just breathe and be." "And what do you think meditation is really about?" Sarah asked gently. "Is it about the external conditions, or is it about something you cultivate within yourself?" This question stopped Maria short. She realized she had been thinking of peace as something that existed only in perfect conditions, rather than as an inner quality she could access, regardless of circumstances. Sarah continued, "The hospital is actually a perfect place to practice Buddhism. Every patient offers you an opportunity to practice compassion. Every stressful moment is a chance to return to your breath. Every difficult colleague teaches you patience. The chaos isn't the enemy of your practice. It's the gymnasium where your practice gets stronger." Over the following weeks, Maria began experimenting with what Sarah called stealth meditation. While walking down hospital corridors, she practiced mindful walking, feeling each step and using the rhythm as an anchor to presence. During brief breaks, instead of scrolling through her phone, she would take 3 conscious breaths and check in with her inner state. When dealing with difficult patients, she would silently offer them loving kindness wishes. May your pain ease. May you feel safe. May you find peace. The transformation wasn't immediate, but gradually, Maria discovered something remarkable. Her presence began affecting others in subtle but profound ways. Agitated patients seemed to calm down when she entered their rooms. Worried family members relaxed when she spoke with them. Even her stressed colleagues began seeking her out during particularly difficult shifts, drawn to the sense of calm she now carried with her. Maria's story shows us that integrating Buddhist practice into daily life doesn't require dramatic changes or hours of additional time. It requires a shift in perspective, seeing every moment as an opportunity for practice rather than an interruption to practice. The workplace, in particular, offers countless opportunities to apply Buddhist principles. Consider the common experience of dealing with a difficult colleague or demanding boss. Traditional responses might include complaining, avoiding the person, or becoming equally difficult in return. Buddhist practice suggests a different approach entirely. When faced with someone who's being unreasonable or unkind, you might pause and remember that all difficult behavior comes from suffering. That demanding boss might be under enormous pressure from their own supervisors. Your irritating coworker might be struggling with personal problems you know nothing about. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it allows you to respond from a place of wisdom rather than reactive emotion. Here's a practical approach you can try the next time someone at work pushes your buttons. First, notice your body's reaction, the tension in your shoulders, the heat rising in your face, the urge to defend or attack. Take one conscious breath before responding. This simple pause creates space between stimulus and response, allowing your wiser self to engage rather than your reactive patterns. Next, silently offer the person compassion. This person is suffering right now, or may this person find peace. You're not being a doormat or agreeing with their behavior. You're simply refusing to add your own anger to an already difficult situation. This internal shift often changes the entire dynamic of the interaction. Then respond to the actual situation rather than to your emotional reaction to it. Address what needs to be addressed, set boundaries if necessary, but do so from a centered place rather than from hurt or anger. You might be amazed at how differently people respond to you when you approach them with calm clarity instead of defensive reactivity. The practice extends beautifully into our most intimate relationships as well. Buddhist teachings offer profound wisdom for navigating the complexities of love, family dynamics, and friendship. The principle of loving kindness becomes especially powerful when applied to the people closest to us, ironically, often the ones who trigger us most. Consider the challenge of listening, truly listening, to someone you love. How often, when your partner or child or friend is speaking, are you already formulating your response, planning what to say next, or judging what they're sharing? Buddhist practice invites us into what's called deep listening, being fully present with another person without agenda or judgment. Deep listening is a form of meditation in action. Instead of focusing on your breath, you focus completely on the person speaking. You listen not just to their words, but to the emotions beneath the words, the needs behind the complaints, the love hiding under the criticism. This quality of attention is one of the greatest gifts you can offer another human being. Let me share a story about a father named Tom who discovered this practice during a particularly difficult period with his teenage daughter. Emma had always been close to her father, but as she entered her teen years, their conversations became increasingly strained. Every attempt at communication seemed to end in arguments or Emma storming off to her room. Tom's initial approach was to try harder to get through to his daughter. He would prepare speeches about responsibility, safety, and making good choices. He would counter her emotional outbursts with logic and reason. But the more he tried to fix her or change her perspective, the more distance grew between them. Desperate to reconnect with Emma, Tom began attending a weekly Buddhist discussion group at a local community center. There he learned about the practice of mindful listening. The teacher, a woman named Linda, who had raised 4 children of her own, explained that most communication problems aren't about finding the right words to say, but about creating the right quality of presence. When someone feels truly heard, Linda taught, they naturally become more open to hearing others. But if they sense you're listening only to formulate your rebuttal, they'll close down defensively. The first step in any difficult conversation is to get genuinely curious about the other person's experience. Tom decided to experiment with this approach. The next time Emma came home upset about something at school, instead of immediately offering advice or trying to fix the situation, he simply listened. When she complained about a teacher being unfair, instead of lecturing her about authority and respect, he asked questions. "That sounds really frustrating. What was that like for you? How did it feel when she said that?" Something magical happened. Emma, perhaps surprised by her father's response, began sharing more deeply about her experience. She talked about feeling invisible in class, about the pressure to fit in with certain groups, about her fears that she wasn't smart enough for the advanced classes she was taking. Tom discovered a vulnerable, thoughtful young woman beneath the defiant exterior he had been trying so hard to change. This shift in Tom's approach didn't solve all their problems immediately. Emma was still a teenager dealing with all the normal challenges of adolescence. But their relationship transformed because Tom learned to meet his daughter where she was rather than where he thought she should be. He practiced what Buddhists call unconditional positive regard, loving someone as they are, not as you wish they were. This principle of accepting people as they are while still holding space for growth applies to all our relationships. It doesn't mean being passive or failing to set appropriate boundaries. Rather, it means recognizing that lasting change comes from acceptance and love, not from pressure and criticism. Buddhist practice also offers tremendous support for building inner resilience, the capacity to remain centered and responsive, even when life becomes overwhelming. In our fast-paced world, resilience isn't luxury. It's a necessity for maintaining mental and physical health. One of the most powerful resilience practices is what Buddhist teachers call taking refuge. This doesn't mean running away from difficulties, but rather cultivating reliable sources of inner strength that you can access during challenging times. You take refuge in your breath when your mind is scattered. You take refuge in compassion when your heart feels closed. You take refuge in the present moment when worry about the future becomes overwhelming. Consider developing what you might call a portable peace practice, simple techniques you can use anywhere to quickly reconnect with your center. This might be taking 3 conscious breaths while stuck in traffic. It could be silently repeating a phrase like, "This too shall pass," during a difficult meeting. Perhaps it's placing your hand on your heart and offering yourself a moment of self-compassion when you make a mistake. The key is consistency rather than duration. 2 minutes of conscious breathing every few hours is far more beneficial than occasional hour-long meditation sessions. Like water slowly carving through stone, regular small practices create profound changes over time. Another essential aspect of building resilience is learning to work skillfully with your own mental habits. Buddhism teaches that our minds naturally tend toward what psychologists call negativity bias. We notice problems more readily than blessings, dangers more quickly than opportunities. This mental tendency served our ancestors well when physical survival was the primary concern, but in modern life, it often creates unnecessary stress and anxiety. You can begin to retrain your mind by practicing what's called appreciative awareness. This involves consciously noticing and acknowledging positive experiences as they happen. When you taste something delicious, pause to really savor it. When someone is kind to you, let yourself fully receive their kindness. When you witness something beautiful, a sunset, a child's laughter, an act of generosity, allow yourself to be nourished by these moments. This isn't about forcing positivity or denying difficulties. It's about creating balance in your perception, ensuring that your mind registers the full spectrum of your experience rather than focusing only on problems and challenges. Research shows that people who regularly practice gratitude and appreciative awareness have stronger immune systems, better sleep, and greater overall life satisfaction. Let me share one more story that beautifully illustrates how Buddhist principles can transform our experience of even the most ordinary daily activities. There once lived a monastery cook named Brother Francis, who had initially been disappointed with his assignment. He had entered the monastery hoping to spend his days in meditation and prayer, but instead found himself responsible for preparing 3 meals a day for 40 monks. For months, Francis approached his kitchen duties with resentment. He chopped vegetables mechanically, while his mind wandered to what he considered more spiritual activities. He rushed through meal preparation so he could get to what he thought was his real practice. The food he prepared was nutritious but uninspired, and he felt increasingly disconnected from his spiritual path. One day, the monastery's eldest monk found Francis muttering complaints while washing dishes. "Brother," the old monk said gently, "what do you think meditation is?" Francis looked up, confused by the question. "Sitting quietly, focusing on God, emptying the mind of distractions," he replied automatically. The elder monk smiled. "And what are you doing right now?" Francis gestured dismissively at the pile of dishes. "Just cleaning up, nothing spiritual. Just mundane kitchen work that keeps me from my real practice." "I see," the monk nodded thoughtfully. "So you believe that God is present when you sit quietly in the chapel, but absent when you wash dishes. You think the divine can be found in silence, but not in the sound of water or the feeling of warm suds on your hands. You imagine that spiritual practice happens only during designated times, not while nourishing your brothers with wholesome food." Francis paused, a soapy plate suspended in his hands. He had never thought about his kitchen work as spiritual practice. The elder continued, "What if every carrot you chop is chopped with the same attention you bring to prayer? What if every meal you prepare is an offering of love? What if washing these dishes becomes a form of meditation, each plate cleaned with the same reverence you bring to Scripture?" From that day forward, Francis's entire experience transformed. He began approaching his kitchen duties as a form of moving meditation. When he chopped vegetables, he focused completely on the task, feeling the weight of the knife, noticing the colors and textures of the food, appreciating the farmers who had grown these gifts from the earth. When he stirred soup, he stirred with love, imagining the nourishment it would provide to his brothers. The transformation wasn't limited to Francis's inner experience. The food he prepared began to taste different, infused somehow with the care and attention he brought to its creation. The other monks noticed the change and began to appreciate their meals in new ways. The kitchen, once a place of drudgery, became a sanctuary where Francis felt as close to the divine as he did in formal prayer. Francis discovered what many Buddhist practitioners learn: there is no separation between spiritual practice and daily life. Every activity can become a doorway to presence when approached with mindful attention. Washing dishes becomes meditation when you feel the warm water and focus completely on the task. Driving becomes practice when you use red lights as reminders to breathe consciously. Even waiting in line at the grocery store becomes an opportunity to practice patience and send loving kindness to the people around you. This integration of practice with daily life is what transforms Buddhism from a set of ideas into a lived wisdom. You don't need to retreat from the world to find peace. You learn to carry peace into whatever situation life presents. You don't need perfect conditions to practice compassion. You use the imperfect conditions of real life as the laboratory for developing greater love and understanding. As we near the end of this exploration of practical Buddhism, remember that the goal isn't to become a perfect practitioner who never feels angry, sad, or afraid. The goal is to develop the capacity to meet all of life's experiences with greater wisdom, compassion, and presence. Some days your practice will feel strong and clear. Other days you'll forget everything we've discussed tonight and react from old patterns of stress and reactivity. Both experiences are part of the path. Buddhism teaches us that awakening isn't a destination we reach, but a quality of engagement we bring to each moment. You're not working towards some future state of enlightenment. You're discovering the peace and wisdom that are available right here, right now, in the midst of your beautifully imperfect human life. Tonight, as you transition toward rest, consider how you might begin integrating these practices into your tomorrow. Perhaps you'll try taking 3 conscious breaths before checking your phone in the morning. Maybe you'll practice deep listening during one conversation. Or possibly you'll approach one routine task, making coffee, brushing your teeth, walking to your car, with the same mindful attention Francis brought to his kitchen work. The invitation is simple. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Let your daily life become your monastery, your ordinary moments become your meditation, and your relationships become your teachers. In this way, the peace we've touched tonight can grow and flourish in the rich soil of your everyday experience. As we arrive at this final part of our gentle journey together, I want you to know that you've already accomplished something beautiful simply by being here. You've given yourself the gift of time. Time to pause. Time to breathe. Time to remember that beneath all the noise and rushing of daily life, there exists a place of perfect stillness within you. If you're still awake and listening, allow yourself to settle even more deeply now. Perhaps adjust your pillow, pull your covers a little higher, or simply let your body sink more completely into whatever is supporting you. And if you're drifting towards sleep, that's perfect too. Let these words become like a gentle stream, carrying you toward the rest your body and mind are seeking. Tonight we've traveled together through ancient stories and timeless wisdom. We've explored the Buddha's journey from palace to enlightenment. We've discovered how our own minds can become sources of peace rather than stress. We've learned that letting go isn't about losing what we love, but about loving with such fullness that we can hold everything lightly. And now, as our time together draws toward its natural close, we turn toward the deepest teaching of all, the peace that has been quietly waiting within you all along. There's a beautiful story from the Zen tradition about a student who traveled great distances seeking enlightenment. His name was Yunmen, and he had studied with many masters, read countless texts, and practiced meditation for years with unwavering dedication. Yet despite all his efforts, the peace he sought seemed to remain just beyond his reach. Each time he thought he was getting closer to understanding, it would slip away like morning mist touched by sunlight. Yunmen had visited monasteries in distant mountains, sat with renowned teachers, and memorized sacred texts until he could recite them perfectly. He had practiced sitting meditation until his legs could remain crossed for hours without movement. He had tried walking meditation, chanting meditation, and every other form of practice he encountered. Still, the profound peace that others described remained elusive. As years passed, Yunmen began to feel frustrated and discouraged. He watched other students seem to find what they were seeking while he continued to struggle. Some nights he would lie awake, wondering if he was simply not capable of the enlightenment he longed for. Perhaps, he thought, some people were naturally spiritual while others were doomed to remain in darkness. Finally, Yunmen decided to visit one last teacher, an old woman known throughout the region for her profound wisdom and gentle manner. She lived alone in a simple cottage on the edge of a forest, spending her days tending a small garden and welcoming seekers who found their way to her door. When Yunmen arrived, exhausted from his long journey and discouraged by his years of seemingly fruitless seeking, he found her sitting quietly on her porch, watching clouds drift slowly across the evening sky. The cottage was humble, but felt somehow sacred. The garden around it bloomed with flowers that seemed to glow in the fading light. There was a quality of stillness about the place that immediately began to calm Yunmen's restless heart. The old woman looked up as he approached, and her eyes held such depth of compassion that he felt seen and accepted in a way he had never experienced before. "Master," he said, bowing respectfully, "I have traveled far to ask you about enlightenment. I have studied and practiced and searched for many years, but I cannot find the peace that others speak of. I'm beginning to wonder if I'm simply not meant for this path. Please, can you tell me where enlightenment can be found?" The old woman looked at him with eyes full of kindness and seemed to consider his question carefully. She could see the sincerity of his seeking and the genuine pain in his heart. Then, instead of speaking immediately, she simply pointed to the sky where a few early stars were beginning to appear in the deepening twilight. "Do you see those stars?" she asked softly. "Yes," Yunmen replied, puzzled by such a simple question after sharing his years of spiritual struggle. "And can you see the space that holds them?" She continued, her voice gentle and patient. Yunmen looked up again, and suddenly something shifted in his perception. He had been focusing so intently on the stars themselves, those points of light, beautiful and distant, that he had completely overlooked the vast, peaceful darkness that embraced them all. The space wasn't empty. It was full of a quiet presence that made the stars possible. Without that space, there could be no stars, no light, no beauty to contemplate. As this recognition deepened, Yunmen felt something profound occurring within his understanding. The space between the stars wasn't just holding them, it was supporting them, nurturing them, allowing them to shine. It was present everywhere, completely available, asking nothing in return. It had been there all along, so obvious that he had never noticed it. "The space," he murmured, and in that moment, understanding dawned like sunrise after the longest night. He realized that he had been searching for enlightenment as if it were a thing to be grasped, a state to be achieved, a destination to be reached. But enlightenment wasn't the stars of experience. It was the vast, peaceful awareness that held all experiences. It wasn't something new to be gained, but something that had always been present, so close and so natural that he had overlooked it completely. The old woman smiled, seeing the recognition in his eyes. "You have been like someone looking everywhere for their glasses while wearing them," she said gently. "The peace you seek has been the very awareness with which you've been seeking. You are not a person who sometimes experiences awareness. You are awareness itself, temporarily believing you are a person." She continued, "All these years, you have been trying to improve yourself, to become more spiritual, to achieve some special state. But what you truly are has never needed improvement. The awareness that is reading these thoughts, that has been present through every moment of your seeking, that space of knowing in which all experiences arise and pass away, this is what you have been looking for." From that evening forward, Yunmen's entire relationship with practice transformed. Instead of striving to achieve some special state, he learned to rest in the natural awareness that was always present. Instead of seeking peace somewhere else, he discovered that he was already home in the vast, quiet space of his own being. His seeking didn't end, but it became a celebration rather than a struggle. This story points to something profound that you can experience right now, even as you listen to these words. Notice that there is an awareness present that is observing whatever you're experiencing. There's something in you that knows you're thinking when thoughts arise. Something that recognizes sounds as they come and go. Something that is aware of sensations in your body, of the rise and fall of your breathing, of the gentle drift towards sleep if that's what's happening. This awareness isn't something you create or something you lose. It's simply here, naturally present, like the space that holds the stars. You can no more lose this awareness than the sky can lose its capacity to hold clouds. Sometimes the clouds are thick and stormy, times when you feel overwhelmed by thoughts or emotions. Sometimes they're light and wispy, peaceful moments like this one. But the sky itself remains unchanged, vast and serene, capable of holding whatever weather passes through. In the gentle tradition of Zen, there's another story about a monk who was troubled by the noise of thoughts in his meditation. No matter how hard he tried to quiet his mind, it seemed filled with an endless stream of mental chatter. He would sit on his meditation cushion and immediately become aware of thoughts about his daily responsibilities, memories from the past, worries about the future, judgments about his practice, and countless other mental movements. The monk became so frustrated that he considered giving up his practice entirely. He felt like a failure compared to other monks who seemed to sit in perfect stillness. His self-criticism only added more noise to his already busy mind, creating a cycle of frustration that seemed impossible to break. His teacher, seeing his distress, invited him to sit by a small waterfall near the monastery. The waterfall was particularly active during this season, with spring snowmelt creating a constant cascade of water over the rocks. For a long time they sat together in silence, listening to the sound of water cascading over rocks. The sound was quite loud, not the gentle trickling one might expect to be calming, but a vigorous, constant rushing. Finally, the teacher spoke. "Tell me, does the sound of this waterfall disturb the silence?" The monk listened more carefully, and something beautiful occurred to him. The sound of the water wasn't destroying the silence. It was arising within silence, held by silence, and eventually dissolving back into silence. In fact, without the background of silence, there could be no sound at all. The silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence that made all sound possible. He began to notice other sounds as well, birds calling in the trees, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant sound of monastery bells. All of these sounds were dancing within the same vast silence, each one perfectly held and perfectly accepted. The silence didn't discriminate between pleasant and unpleasant sounds. It embraced them all with equal spaciousness. In the same way, his teacher continued, your thoughts are not disturbing your peace. They are arising within your natural awareness, dancing briefly in the space of your mind, and then dissolving back into the stillness from which they came. You are not the thoughts. You are the vast, peaceful awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. Just as this waterfall doesn't damage the silence, your thinking doesn't damage your essential peace. This understanding can bring tremendous relief to anyone who has struggled with a busy mind. You don't need to stop thinking to find peace. You only need to recognize the space of awareness that holds all thinking. This space is naturally calm, naturally present, naturally whole. It's the sky of your being, always available, never disturbed by whatever weather passes through. As you rest here now, you might experiment with this recognition. Instead of following your thoughts or trying to control them, simply notice the awareness that observes them. Notice how this awareness is naturally peaceful, requiring no effort to maintain. Rest in this recognition, allowing it to support you like water supports a floating leaf. There's a quality to this awareness that Buddhist teachings describe as naturally compassionate. Just as the sky embraces all weather without judgment, your deepest nature embraces all experiences with unconditional acceptance. When you rest in this natural awareness, you discover that it's impossible to truly dislike yourself. The part of you that judges and criticizes is just another cloud passing through the vast sky of your being. This leads us to one of the most beautiful aspects of inner peace. It's not something you have to earn or deserve. It's not dependent on your accomplishments, your relationships, your circumstances, or even your spiritual practice. Peace is the nature of awareness itself, and awareness is what you most fundamentally are. You don't have to become worthy of peace. You already are peace, temporarily forgetting your true nature. In ancient times, there lived a hermit who spent his days in quiet contemplation in a cave high in the mountains. People from the village below would sometimes climb the difficult path to ask him questions about life and suffering. His answers were always simple, but those who truly listened found profound wisdom in his words. The hermit had a way of pointing to truths that were so obvious they were easily overlooked. One day, a wealthy merchant arrived at the hermit's cave, carrying a heavy bag of gold coins. The merchant was well dressed and clearly prosperous, but his face showed the strain of someone who carried heavy burdens despite his material success. "Holy man," the merchant said, breathing heavily from the steep climb, "I will give you all this gold if you can tell me the secret of happiness. I have more money than I can spend, a beautiful home that others envy, a loving family, successful business ventures, yet I feel empty inside. What am I missing? What more do I need to find peace?" The hermit looked at the bag of gold and then at the merchant's anxious face. He could see the genuine suffering beneath the material success, the way prosperity had failed to touch the deeper longing in this man's heart. Without speaking immediately, he walked to the mouth of the cave where the morning sun was just beginning to illuminate the valley below. "Come," he said simply, gesturing for the merchant to join him. Together they stood watching as sunlight gradually touched the treetops, then flowed down the mountainsides like golden honey, awakening the world to another day. The view was breathtaking. The entire valley spread below them, farms and villages nestled between rolling hills, a river winding through the landscape like a silver ribbon. But the hermit directed the merchant's attention to something much smaller and closer. The hermit pointed to a small wildflower growing in a crack in the rock near his feet. It was a simple bloom, nothing spectacular or rare, just a common mountain flower that had somehow found enough soil and moisture in the harsh environment to thrive. Does this flower worry about whether it has enough sunlight? He asked. The merchant looked at the simple bloom, its petals turned trustingly toward the warming sun. There was something about its perfect simplicity that made him pause. No, he replied, beginning to see where this might be leading. Does it compare itself to other flowers or worry about whether it's beautiful enough? The hermit continued, his voice gentle and patient. No, the merchant said again, his voice softer now as he really looked at the flower. It wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. It wasn't striving or struggling or comparing itself to the roses in rich men's gardens. Does it struggle to be something other than what it is, or does it simply rest in its own nature, naturally turning toward the light? The hermit asked. The merchant was quiet for a long moment, watching the little flower sway gently in the morning breeze. Slowly, understanding began to dawn in his heart. The flower's contentment didn't come from what it possessed, but from its natural, unforced alignment with life itself. It didn't try to be happy, it simply was what it was, and happiness naturally arose from that simple being. This flower teaches us something profound, the hermit said gently. It doesn't seek happiness, it expresses its nature, and happiness flows from that expression. It doesn't worry about having enough or being enough. It simply receives what's available and offers what it can. It finds perfect contentment in being exactly what it is, where it is, with what it has. The merchant felt something shifting in his chest as these words sank in. He realized that all his striving and accumulating had been based on the belief that happiness was something he needed to acquire. He had been trying to build happiness from external materials when it was actually his natural state, temporarily covered by the very efforts he was making to find it. The secret you seek, the hermit continued, is not hidden in some distant place or locked away in secret teachings. Like this flower, you already have everything you need for true contentment. You are already whole, already connected to the source of life, already held by the same love that makes the flowers bloom and the stars shine. The only thing missing is the recognition of what has always been present. The merchant left the mountain that day without giving the hermit any gold, but with something far more valuable, the understanding that happiness isn't something to be acquired, but something to be uncovered. Like the flower naturally turning toward the sun, he learned to turn toward the natural peace and wholeness that were his birthright. His business continued to prosper, but now he held his success lightly, enjoying it without depending on it for his sense of worth. This teaching resonates particularly deeply as we prepare for sleep, because sleep itself is a natural return to our essential nature. When you fall asleep each night, where does the busy, worried, planning mind go? In deep sleep, you're not trying to be peaceful, you simply are peace. You're not working to be content. Contentment is your natural state when all the mental effort relaxes. The transition into sleep can become a beautiful practice of letting go and trusting. As consciousness gradually dissolves, you're practicing the ultimate surrender, releasing control of awareness itself. You're trusting that something deeper than your thinking mind will take care of you through the night. You're allowing yourself to merge with the vast, peaceful darkness that holds all dreams and all rest. Tonight, As you feel yourself naturally drifting towards sleep, you might sense this deeper dimension of yourself. The part of you that worries and plans is becoming quiet now. The part that judges and compares is settling into stillness. What remains is the essential you, aware, peaceful, naturally content, held by the same infinite love that cradles the stars and nurtures the flowers. In this deep place, there's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to become. You can rest completely in the understanding that you are already whole, already perfect in your imperfection, already home in the vast space of your own being. The ancient Buddhist blessing speaks of taking refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. As you prepare for rest, you might understand these refuges in a new way. The Buddha is your own awakened nature, the awareness that has been present throughout our entire journey tonight. The Dharma is the natural law of love and compassion that governs all existence. And the Sangha is the community of all beings, the recognition that you are never truly alone in this vast cosmos. Rest now in these refuges. Rest in your own awakened nature. Rest in the knowledge that love is the fundamental force of the universe. Rest in the comfort of knowing that you belong here, that your existence is a gift to the world, that your very being is a blessing. Let your breathing become slow and natural. Let your body settle completely into comfort. Let your mind release any remaining concerns, knowing that this moment is complete, exactly as it is. Allow yourself to be held by the infinite tenderness that surrounds you always. As sleep begins to embrace you, may you carry with you the deep knowing that peace is not something you create, but something you are. May you rest in the understanding that love is your true nature, and that this love extends to all beings everywhere. May your dreams be gentle, and your rest be profound. And when you wake tomorrow, may you remember that the peace we've touched tonight is always available, as close as your next breath, as natural as the sky, as reliable as the love that holds the entire universe in perfect, eternal embrace. Rest well, dear friend. You are safe. You are loved. You are home.